I'm actually surprised how many of you I have not had interactions with yet. So this is a really good sign. I love talking about this grant program. And just to give you a little bit on my background, prior to joining the staff at the Montana Arts Council 8 years ago as Arts Education Director, I have a prior career made up of equal parts arts education and 14 years and another 14 years in arts presenting. So I originated the Bitterroot Performing Arts Councils series and developed that over 14 years before coming here. So just know that I have a pretty good understanding of the work you do. And I really just hope to be able to fashion this session to meet your needs. So first of all, I don't think we need to wait until the end for questions. If you're not finding an easy way to break into the discussion to ask a question, just go ahead and put it in the chat, and I think Emily can help me attend to those, and she'll feel even more free to interrupt me, right, Emily? Yeah. Um, and secondly, if you have suggestions for, I guess, further discussion, ways that we can kind of at the end of the session, just kind of delve in a little bit to the particular needs that you have in your organizations, whether it be questions about these specific grants that we're going to talk about today, but also if there are other aspects of your work that could really use some help and support. Um, think about those, and when we get around to the end, hopefully we'll have time to cover some of those things. So I made us a few slides just so in part so that we could make them available to you after, so you don't have to take so many notes. Um, and also for the benefit of anyone who didn't have the opportunity to join us today. So they are by far the most ridiculously colored uh, slides I think I have ever created, but I was inspired by Eric Heidel, our communications director, made a new grant or a new logo um, that we have variations of. So um, here you go. Some bright color in this on this winter day. So um, at any rate, this session is primarily focused on the Artists in Schools and Communities grant program, which has existed for quite a while here at the Montana Arts Council. It is comprised of two different grant opportunities, so we'll dig into that. Again, regarding questions you may have, even if it isn't related to these grant questions, I'm happy to collect those questions for my colleagues here at MAC, and if I can't answer them, somebody will. So here's just a quick agenda of the overview I'm going to give. The AISC history and background lightly. The overview of the two separate processes, in other words, the two grants that are available to you. A little bit about our grants management system and application process. I'm not too sure how familiar you are all individually, so we can cover a little bit of that as needed. And a little bit on best practices in terms of applying for AISC grants or grants generally. And then leaving plenty of room for a little bit of a strategy discussion, how to use these grants to your advantage, as well as some time for question and answer. So some background on the Artists in Schools and Communities grant. Here is the overview of the grant program. Programs designed to foster an increase in arts learning and opportunities for all Montanans. AISC places a priority on robust arts learning in all forms, um, often builds on prior learning or experience, connects learners with professional artists or teaching artists, and offers opportunities to gain knowledge and or master a technique, a medium, genre, or discipline. Um, AISC has been in existence through numerous iterations over the past 50 years, since the 1970s. So uh, not too many years that we have been in existence that we haven't had this program. And other state arts agencies across the country have a similarly named program, by the way. Um, in every fiscal year offered since 2015, we have typically had at least two separate grant opportunities, as we do now. Um, Grant projects range from single day opportunities to multi-week. Um, the program serves learners of every age and ability and provides organizations for an opportunity to achieve mission-driven outreach. In other words, um, not only can this provide funding for your organization, but this grant program can help you achieve your mission of outreach and audience building. Um, There are two grant opportunities, as I mentioned, under Artists in Schools and Communities, using the acronym AISC. They are named AISC Experiences and AISC Residencies. Here's a summary of the Experiences grants. We have 3 opportunities per year, 3 deadlines. You may receive a grant one time during the year under this category. So if you apply, let's say, to the April 17th deadline and are not awarded funding, you would be very welcome to try again. AISC recognizes the many pathways for initial learning, either as a jumping off point or inspiration, or as an extension beyond residency learning. So what this means is that that initial spark of an experience might come through a performance, let's say, a concert experience. In the case of some other grant categories, it might be a field trip, um, an experience, maybe hearing from an artist, sort of lecture demonstration style, which could be important for all of you. And the opportunity for question and answer or a talk back after the show. So lots of opportunity there to provide that initial inspiration around a particular art form. But also it could be the case that an experiences grant follows a deeper residency. In other words, the artist comes, works with a group of learners in a extended workshop. They go away, and then this grant helps extend that learning beyond that initial visit. The request range under this grant is $250 to $2,500. And this is a really key component that we changed a few years ago. There is no match required. Many projects are led or sponsored by non-arts or community organizations. So often the larger grants are led by what we call our arts partners, and um, and those are typical arts organizations, symphonies, etc. In the case of this grant program, sometimes it is a community center that wants to sponsor an experience, and they are equally eligible. There are 3 categories under this grant process. Purchases of tools, supplies, or equipment, including there have been sets of instruments purchased for classrooms, for instance. Um, Transportation, which I think would be important to all of you, um, because oftentimes the presenting organization, and I experienced this in my own past work, were more than happy to share a performance experience with maybe students in local schools, but the barrier was the transportation to get those learners to the performance space. So that this grant can be used for that purpose. And the final one is artist experiences. And this is a broad use of artist experiences. As I already mentioned, um, a lecture demonstration would qualify, a talk back after the performance. It could be in person, virtual, hands-on or not. So the door is sort of much more wide open under this grant process as to how those artist experiences are designed. Um, again, they may or may not include hands-on learning, which is a requirement of the other grant process that we'll talk about. Um, and, there's so much opportunity in just that category alone that I would say and regularly do say that grantees are still teaching us how this particular grant can be used. And lastly, I'll just say about this that it is highly conducive to arts integration projects, within a school setting, combining um, maybe art and music, that kind of thing. So that's something to keep in mind. And also multidisciplinary projects. I regularly encourage arts educators, particularly at the high school level, maybe to think about bringing in a guest artist who works in a different discipline than they do. So combining, let's say, dance with music. So lots of opportunity there. Um, the larger grant process under Artists in Schools and Communities is the AISC Residencies Grant. We only take applications in through one deadline per year. In the upcoming, for the upcoming fiscal year, it is March 17th. This continues MAC's longtime tradition, again, since the 1970s, of supporting teaching artist-led or artist-in-residence experiential learning experiences. So with a request range of $2,500 to $10,000 with a match required, a 50% match of the project the first time around, or excuse me, after the first time. But if it is your first time accessing this grant, you receive 2-to-1 funding. So let's say the overall project is $15,000. We would provide 2/3, in other words, the ceiling amount of $10,000 toward the grant project, and you, as the presenter, a presenting organization, would provide 5,000. It's not necessary to go that high, obviously, but that's one example of the way to make the greatest use of this grant. Projects typically are of a greater depth than AISC experiences, which doesn't always mean that it is more time. Sometimes that greater depth is happening inside of one day, such as an afternoon masterclass. But there's a lot of variation there as well. This grant, though, these projects must include hands-on learning. So something like a lecture demonstration or a talk back paired with a performance wouldn't be enough to secure grant funding under this particular category. They may be comprised, the projects may be comprised of a longer one-day session or a multi-day or parts or experiences. So sometimes AISC residencies is a guest artist going into, let's say, a school setting once a week for 8 weeks or 10 weeks. Um, so there's equal variation just in that regard. The emphasis under this particular grant is much more on process versus product. Learning how an artist works is really important to every age of learner. And so that's sort of where the emphasis is placed in this grant opportunity. Um, it often includes a culminating event, so the learners showing their work, um, despite it not being necessarily the greatest emphasis of the project. It is fun for whatever age or ability of learner to sort of show their knowledge gained during that time. So, and oh dear, I my slides are out of order. I just realized. Anyway,
Oh, I was going to ask
some
a quick question anyways, if that's okay, Monica.
yes, yeah,
You had mentioned transportation support, and my question was if
yes,
you could just clarify if that's specifically for like the learner, because sometimes our presenter organizations will take into account artist travel and transportation as well. So I just wanted to clarify that.
right. We don't uh, we don't require that you stay to one lane, even though there are these three categories of funding that we promote um, during the experiences process, the AISC experiences. Your project could be comprised of sort of all of the above if that's the best way to make use of the grant. So it could be that you are paying the artist a fee and you're also covering some of the artist transportation as well as providing, let's say, a bus to connect learners with that guest artist. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes. And then in the residencies um, grant process, we do expect that there's going to be some transportation for the guest artist involved or the teaching artist if it's a longer term experience. So we can talk more about that too, and all there are so many variations, I think, into how to use that experiences grant in particular that, we'll have lots to talk about. Um, the primary differences I put on this slide just to give you a little reference chart. The request range again for residencies is 2,500 to 10,000. For experiences, it is 250 to 2,500. A match is required with residencies, but not required under the experiences process. One due date a year for residencies, three due dates a year under experiences. And by the way, you are eligible as an organization to receive one of each grant per year, which is not to say that you'll be awarded funds under both, but it is not at all uncommon for that to happen. And given that, the potential then is 12,500 per year per organization. Um, Hands-on learning is required for residencies, is not necessarily required under the experiences process, which is much more about recognizing that there are many ways that learners can learn. And sometimes it's that initial spark of seeing a live performance. Um, and then that leads to a deeper learning or workshop following that. Um, the fiscal year begins July 1 of this calendar year and ends on June 30th of next year, 2026. So that's the year that we're talking about here. So 25, 26 encompasses those dates. So anybody applying in March or April would not have access to those funds until July 1 or later. Um, and then lastly on the chart is the project categories. Um, Under residencies, we're talking about a guest or teaching artist in residence experience, whereas with the experiences, the smaller grant, it can be a project that is comprised of firsthand encounters with art or artists, including students attending a performance, transportation, tools, supplies, and equipment. So that's the reference page on that. Any questions to clarify the differences between these two? Okay. The best practices slides that I wanted to share. Oh, I'm so sorry. Um, these are just general best practices, right, for any grant writing to start early. Have I pushed the envelope to the end many a time? Yes, I have. It's not comfortable, and typically it is not the most successful way to go. But just starting with a sketch of a possible project and having conversations with others in your organization, or if you're partnering, let's say with a school nearby, just providing ample time to have those discussions, I think is really great. Um, and then to work as a team, it's always much more successful when there are multiple individuals involved in designing the experiences and actually working on the grant itself. So a little bit of divide and conquer and using everybody's um, strengths to their advantage. Um, Engage the artist or organization with a commitment to the experience first, including the fee, the dates, locations, and a preview of what that contract or working agreement would look like. And I often recommend that grantees start with the budget. It is a little bit counterintuitive, but it is surprising how many questions you have to answer um, about your project through devising the budget. So um, many a grantee waits until the end to work on their budget, and sometimes that is um, the piece that kind of holds them back at the last minute. So just starting with the budget and answering the questions therein, I think help you move forward from that point on. So um, in collaborating with a guest or teaching artist, and I'll show you in a minute when we look at the actual grant application form online, um, there is a collaborate button. In other words, you can invite someone to contribute narrative answers to the application without giving them access to your whole grant account. That's a useful tool and highly recommended. I think it's important to have the artist's perspective on what that experience is like. And as presenters, that is part and parcel with having the contract worked out for the artist experience. And they often have something ready to go, so no need to invent the wheel. They often, as you know, have something that they have already devised to share as educational outreach. And if not, just having a discussion with their representative or preferably with the artist themselves on on what it is that you would like to provide for the learners is just a great way to accomplish the grant. Um, Mutually determined ways to collect data and documentation. That's just something you want to think about in advance of the project so that you can put that in motion and not have to sort of make that up after the fact in order to do a final report. Um, and then as well, giving thought to how you're going to assess the learning formally or informally for your use as your organization and for the final report during the project. So some recommendations along that line are things like um, just a slight interview question or two that you are asking participants on the spot and just doing an audio recording, even on a cell phone, to collect that data, and then just having someone assigned during the project to document numbers. Um, Looking at the final report, if you are awarded funding in advance of your project happening, is the best way to plan for that. Um, and I'm really happy to help you think through all the many ways that you could assess learning using formal tools if it's a deeper experience or a long-term grant project, or something as simple as what I just mentioned. If it's just sort of a 1 hour, maybe talk back with artists. So I hope that you will, as you're working on a grant, consult with me or another staff member. We all provide reviews of grants in process and give you feedback before you ever submit a grant. So that's just something to keep in mind. And this is not at all a pat on my back or on my colleague's back, but you know, a lot of times when I'm looking back at a chart of submitted grants that that were awarded funding and then noting the one or two oftentimes in a group that aren't funded, it is typically the grantees or the applicants that did not reach out, did not ask for a review, um, that are not awarded funding. And again, that's not a pat on the back. That's just a fact of me being very familiar with the questions in the grant and the content expected. So it's very easy for me to help a grantee find the things that they might have overlooked or maybe misread or misunderstood in the grant. So um, those are just a few slides of intro that that I included today, but I'm hoping that we'll have a really great discussion in a few minutes, including how these AISC grants might be used to your best advantage as a presenting organization. So be ready to share some thoughts about that. But I'm going to pop out of these slides for a minute and just share with you what the grants look like in the grant system right after we leave room for some questions. Before I dive into that, I just am hoping that there might be something I can answer for you at this point. Anyone?
Monica, it's Misty. See if I can start my video
Hi.
here.
Yeah.
Could you give us some examples maybe of, I guess I'm thinking of performing artists or, could you give us some examples of some projects that have worked out well or, do you understand what I'm asking? I'm not sure if I'm
Yeah.
saying it correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but not every family in a community can bring um, their family to a performance that you're offering. So bringing the performance to them is a great place to start. If you have a situation where you have a venue over a period of time, like a couple of days, and maybe the day before, day of, day after, a guest artist is there, if you're able to host a school day performance and bus in students from a surrounding area, I think that's a really successful way to make the performance accessible for them. If you do that, I would recommend you can, of course, make the performance free, but I've had a lot of success in charging $1. I think as presenters, we want to make sure that we are um, uh, you know, um, helping learners understand that the arts need to be paid for. Artists, being an artist is a job, an occupation. And so, being able to just kind of instill that idea while also making it very accessible. And then, of course, working with the schools to cover that $1 for a student if they're not able to is just a way to help kind of make the formula of the grant project work. Often, if you're bringing in an artist already for a concert, they are eager to spend a little more time in that community if their schedule allows. And those are experiences that you just are not able to, if you were to, as an organization, present the opportunity just as a school experience without combining it with your regular presenting, that would probably not be affordable. But once an artist has already made a plan to be there, tagging on a classroom visit or a school day concert is, just a great way to extend the possibilities. So those are all great things that you can do, as well as a masterclass or workshop. The only difference really being is the level that the learners are at. When I was presenting, we would this was a great deal for the university nearby, let me tell you, but we would often bring our guest artists to the university students for a workshop. And those were, students who played that particular instrument, oftentimes who are getting a very deep experience with feedback from the artist. And it can be really life-changing as well for high school students in that situation. In Hamilton, we had presented one year the great ensemble Imani Winds from the East Coast, and they began their their experience with the students with just giving the students a little taste of the music that they perform. This was the day of their concert, incidentally, and they played a few tunes, and I noticed that there were some girls in the back row were kind of giggling and shuffling around, and I was all ready to get, my hunches were up, and I was thinking like, oh, how rude, how dare they? And what it really was is they were literally tickled to hear their instruments played so well that they just kind of couldn't contain it. And so at the end of the session, when I offered them a ticket to the concert that night, they were lining up, at the office to get those tickets. So I think it really shifted the way they thought about the music they played, the instruments they played, all of those things. And that was just bringing the ensemble into that one high school band. Classroom. So there are so many ways that you can extend the possibilities once you have that artist in your community. And I love to dream up those possibilities with presenters. So if you're thinking that there is one guest artist in your coming season that might be a really great candidate for that, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. Did that answer what you were
Yes, it
hoping
does
to
give me.
get, Misty?
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, that's
And
just a smattering. There's so many more possibilities.
yeah, and if it's okay for me to interject really quick, one thing
Yeah.
that came up at our conference showcase this last October, as maybe an example you could speak to is Rob Verdi, who's a saxophone player from Southern California, and he has this whole program where he he has arrangements for band for a school band to accompany him in a concert, and so I think he has like a residency in mind when he is organizing
Yeah.
tours, and so I wonder if that sort of thing, or even Misty, like I
Yes.
know uh, for Judith Arts will often bus students to Belt, to Belt, I think, or
Mhm.
to join
Yeah.
a school performance there.
Absolutely. I think that when the artist has something in mind, something that, has been tested already, especially along that lines, it is a really great way um, to not only make a really obviously meaningful experience for the students and the artist as well, but also to help build your audience. Once student, this is a tried and true method, right? Like once students are in the performance, then their family members want to see them in that performance as well. So you may gain audience members that you might not otherwise see at the performances. So that's a particularly useful sort of community building activity, as well as, again, it just being incredibly meaningful, something the students would never forget. And I've been a part of some of those projects as well, where a local ensemble joined the artists on stage. And maybe it's only one piece, given the time they've had to rehearse together. But being able to share that one piece on a main stage performance is super life-changing. So I recommend that, you keep your eye open for those possibilities as well. Other questions so far? Please don't be shy.
Hi, Monica. This is Amy from Out and Belt. A real simple
Hi.
question. My apology, I
Yeah.
came in a little late. In
Oh, no.
regards to the experiences, and the ones that you mentioned, these are things that we've been able to do in Belt the last couple of years.
Mhm.
We try to
Mhm.
have it from 4 to 6 experiences. Would we be
Yeah.
able to submit all of those? If we say we've booked 4 educational outreach experiences, can we submit all 4 as long as it's under the 12.5? Or are we limited to one experience?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Amy. First, the 12.5 is the combination of receiving one experiences grant and one residencies grant. So I just want to make sure that's clear. So the residencies grant has a ceiling of $10,000, and the experiences grant has a ceiling of $2,500. We absolutely have received requests that encompass multiple learning opportunities, all sort of combined together as one grant project. So that is allowed. And I think the only cautionary tale I would give there is to be sure that you're not trying to make the grant do too much. In other words, putting the stress on yourselves as a presenting organization to make more things happen than is necessary. That said, obviously $10,000 can go a long way toward a series of learning opportunities. And if that's what works best for your organization, that's kind of part of the strategy of how to best use um, the grants to your advantage. So that's all a part of the conversation that we can have for sure.
I
Yeah.
guess just for clarification then, because
Mhm.
I understand a little better what you mean as far as separating the
Yeah.
12.5. So under the
Right.
experiences, the max is 2,500. Is that per experience? Or if we say we are giving 4 outreaches at the school, could all 4 of those experiences be for under 2,500 or each one up to 2,500?
Both grant processes, both grants, in other words, the AISC experiences and the AISC residencies can be used to encompass multiple learning sessions. Um, I think it's just more possible with the larger grant. But it really just depends on your situation. I mean, if you have an artist extending outreach into, let's say, 4 classrooms at $500 each, and then you're accounting for another $500 for related costs, transportation, supplies, and whatnot, then it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could also use the smaller grant that way. Again, I think it's just more common with the larger AISC residencies grant. Does that help?
A little bit. Um,
A little wishy-washy, I realize, but the
well,
answer is
I
yes.
guess more
And
directly is
Mhm.
if we had 4 separate artists that come during our season to do 4 separate experiences, I'm not talking about residents
Right.
at all. 4
Yeah.
separate
Yep.
experiences on 4 different days over the year.
Yep.
Would we
Yep.
submit a grant for each one on its own, or can we bundle them under one grant as long as we don't exceed the 2,500?
Yes, you
An
can bundle
experience.
them. Yeah.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think what I was trying to speak to is the uh, as long as there's no repetition or overlap between the two grants that you would apply for, you need to make sure of that. In other words, you're not asking funding for the same thing
Mhm.
um, under each grant. But but both offer bundling possibilities. Again, I think it just depends on your situation, and what is possible in terms of what the artist is able to offer under that sort of price point. Um, you're welcome to bundle in both cases. I think when you look at the grant application, um, sometimes it gets a little bit challenging to show all the many things you're doing with that one smaller grant inside of that grant application. But I can guide you toward ways to sort of simplify that, just in terms of the way you bundle your uploads and, like creating a summary of all the experiences and all of that. I feel like I would be able to give you some guidance that would help make sense of all that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Monica. I appreciate your time.
Oh, sure, sure. Anything else before I take a run through um, the grant processes? And also before we move on, I am curious to know how many of you have ever applied for an Artist in Schools and Communities grant, an AISC grant. Can you use your little hand raise or something? Or just say it out loud if you have. I'm seeing I have never applied before. Has anyone on the call applied?
I have, in a different life, in a different job.
Right.
Yeah, and we actually, I think, applied for a residency style project, and it was to bring some group instruction to the local, I think, middle schools, maybe some elementary schools, to the beginning students, because at the time the symphony had several core musicians available to give that kind of instruction.
Right, right. I think I remember that. And that's a, perfect example of how to um, how to make that, make it work and make the best use out of your artist visit and the grant funds available. And it's sort of a little bit of a synergy there where one bolsters the other. Sometimes having those educational experiences is a great way to create a really meaningful overall experience with your guest artist in the community. So while adding funds to that particular budget. So really where we live, getting the artists there is half the battle, right? So we have to take advantage of that while we can. So all right. So if there aren't any other questions at the moment, I'm just going to go through a little bit of each of these grants available this year. The first one is AISC experiences, and give me one moment here. Need to make sure to give you the applicant view. Can everyone see the application now? Is that a yes?
Not yet.
Okay.
I still see, but my
Okay.
connection might be a little bit slow.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna try again.
Oh, you might have to select share and choose the screen if you opened a new.
Yeah. I'm attempting to do that. Let's see. I'm gonna just stop share for 1 second and then retry it. That might be the better way to do it.
And Zoom might let you just share your entire window, so we just see everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, there. Okay,
Yeah.
I think we see application now.
Just see my messy desktop. That's okay. So I think what's a little bit challenging for new grantees looking at these processes is if you haven't done a lot of um, applying online, either through our grant portal or anyone else's, it feels a little overwhelming until you sort of gain some comfort with it. I'm always happy to personally walk you through this. Um, when you're ready to proceed, this is what I do for all grantees when they are in process with a grant. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But I'll just run through just a little bit of an orientation for this process. The first drop down, the little carrot there, is the guidelines for the grant. Please, please, please read the guidelines before you do anything. It will save you so much time. It tells you everything that you need to know and even mentions for experiences the dates of the 3 deadlines this year. And once, sorry, this is a little slow. Once you go through that, the next section is the project information. And this is just standard fare. It is a lot of boxes, but it's the project start and end dates, the name of your project. We ask you for a descriptive sentence, and that will be public. So keep that in mind. You want to keep it explanatory, but not too long. We ask the primary age group of the learners, the provider's discipline, um, and then a place to add links. And that could be the artist's website, but it could also be if they primarily use Instagram or something like that. The next section is financial information. And our big win for the year is that we took away the downloading the Excel spreadsheet budget. I am pretty confident Bill Galt is going to be excited about this. Um, that we have boxes now to address those questions. So no more download, filling out a Excel form and re-uploading it back into the process. So it's the little things, right? Um, anyway, there are a number of financial questions there, and not all the boxes are needed. They're just there if you need them. So in some cases, you're just entering a number on one line. And then in both cases with expenses and income on the project, we give you a place to add any notes that you might need to explain those numbers. And then in the narrative section, on the experiences grant, this is, I think, the message I really want to get across today. Because of all those categories that we talked about, transportation, artist experiences, purchases of tools, supplies, and equipment, we couldn't do a branching question where you just pick a lane and move on. We had to give you the opportunity to address any of the questions that will apply. So we ask about the project overview, for a project overview and some learning objectives and who the learners are. But after that, I don't know if you can see this very well, but in green right here, it says, um, for the following items, provide narrative answers and uploads where needed only if they apply to your project. So in other words, under these questions, none of them are required simply because they don't apply to every project. So if you're only providing transportation, for instance, to connect learners with a daytime school performance, then you're only going to answer the 1 or 2 questions related to that. So what looks like a huge, long, grant application is really not so bad once you understand that, not all the questions are required. And then the last little section, we do ask for like work samples as they apply, or support materials. Sometimes it might be, an artist one page that you're uploading there, that kind of thing. and a little bit about where the activities will take place, locations. Um, and then the last section is just the assurance that you have read the application and the guidelines and the terms of payment, that kind of thing. So kind of some logistics there that you're signing off on that you understand before you submit the grant. But provided that you've had, some time to think about the kind of experience you would like to um, focus on for your project, those things come pretty quick and easy. I would say that like getting the artist signature on the signature page is something that trips people up last minute. So you might want to just put that in process from the get-go once you get an agreement from a cooperating artist. Um, On the other process, the AISC residency, um, on one second. This is, no surprise, a little bit longer process. You're asking for quite a bit more in funding through this process. So um, I don't think that anyone is surprised that maybe some of the questions are a bit more in depth. We did intentionally try to keep the grant application questions on the experiences grant pretty straightforward, pretty easy. And by the way, sometimes we allow for, let's say, 5,000 characters just to um, serve those who have a lot to say. That doesn't ever mean that we expect you to enter an answer that long. In fact, it's our preference. If you can get your point across in a handful of sentences, that is the ideal, especially for the grant reviewers who are having to spend quite a lot of time reviewing grants. So, um, oh, hold on. So sorry.
That's probably good news for a lot of us. I did not know
Yes.
that the character count did not denote expectations.
Yes, I know. It's a welcome surprise for a lot of people when I tell them that. Really like say what you need to say. And again, some of those have been increased, I think, over the time that I've been here because I would hear from applicants who say, but we're trying to combine, essentially four experiences in this one grant, as we mentioned with Amy's question. So we have to leave room for that, but it is we don't weigh these by the number of words or anything. So you know, just I would say though on the other side, um, some of the unsuccessful grants have not said enough. They haven't provided the reviewers enough to go on. That's I would say not very common, but I would say maybe a handful of times a year, someone submits a grant, usually without asking for feedback, that really doesn't do the job of explaining what the experience is. So that's, I know, not something any of you would do, but it does happen at times where when you're the one designing the project, a lot of it is in your own mind and in your own planning, and maybe the applicant takes a little bit for granted that we'll be able to figure out as the reader. So um, anyway, um, I'll just give you a quick look at the residencies process. Um, and while I'm getting us there, if you don't have a grant account in our grants management system, that's something I can easily help you set up. Um, Once you have an account, you have it essentially forever. Um, and you can see prior requests that were submitted, that kind of thing. Um, Again, there are guidelines for the grant that you'll see first. Once you have read those, there's another section very similar to the other grant where we're asking for kind of the details. You know, who are the learners? What are the project dates? What are you titling the project? That kind of thing. And in the case of this grant, what might trip you up is this grant is available to organizations who do the teaching essentially. In other words, if Great Falls Symphony wanted to send some of its players into the community as the teaching artists, they would be the organization versus the artist, if that makes sense. So when we're talking about artists, we're often referring to a guest artist or a teaching artist, maybe doing something a little bit longer term. Just as with the other process, there's a place for financial information. And in this case, with the AISC residencies, you have to demonstrate where at least you think the match will come from. And it's absolutely fine if that changes by the end of the project because you'll have a chance to address that in the final report. And again, a place to just add some detail if you need to explain anything. The narrative questions here are also similar to the other process, but it's actually less complex on the number of questions, but maybe a higher expectation in terms of what you put forth in those narrative answers. So a bit about the teaching artist selection, how you'll assess the learners, that kind of thing. There are boxes and uploads is the essence of the whole application. And I'm happy to help you at any time with any of these. Sometimes uploads can be a little tricky, that kind of thing. If we need to reduce the file size, all of that. That's what we call technical support here at MAC, and I'm happy to help you with any of those tricky bits along the way. And then again, contacts and accessibility is a section. This is just for your reference, no questions contained there, and then another assurances and signatures section. So you know, referring to that chart on the slides, and I can send these to you, Emily, if you want to share those out. That comparison chart of the difference between the two applications, I think, will be really useful to you, but they do share a lot in common, other than those kind of key differences. So that's a bit of an overview on the two grant processes that we have. What questions do you have for me?
I actually had one quick one, if you don't mind showing that application one more time, because I have found
Oh, sure.
that in using this interface and before I start the application or even consider applying, I will go and I will use the option to like print the whole thing or like export a PDF. I think it's questions list up there at the top. Yeah, and I actually have that in front of me because as I was going through the narrative questions, I was making notes on what questions would be easily answered by presenters, what would you need the artist input on, or if you're answering questions about curriculum integration, like where would you need to collaborate with the school staff or teacher. So yeah, I found this document to be useful in planning and how to approach the whole process.
That's exactly right. And I really appreciate you reminding me to show that because it's very helpful when you're in process if you need to work offline, as well as just keeping it sort of handy in your files and reminding yourself of the details that you submitted in the grant. I think for some grantees, they submit and then it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So having the ability to print that off a finished copy of your grant before you submit is helpful. The other thing that related to this that I'll say is that if you're just looking to get the grant questions and the guidelines, those exist on our website, on art.mt.gov/AISC, and you can access a PDF or an HTML copy on that page of both processes. So if you're just looking to work offline, that's an easy way to do it and get going on the elements of your project. And I will back
The
up
link's in the
here and
chat.
just show you where that collaborate button is. I think you were asking a question and I may have missed it.
Oh, no, I just wanted
Was
to
that
say I
you?
put the link in the chat. So they have the link to the AISC page on the MAC website.
Got it. Thank you so much. I am not sure why we do have a collaborate button. It's in the upper right, and I might have to proxy as someone to be able to show that to you. But right where it says question list, just under that, there's a button that says collaborate. When you hit that button, you just pop in the email address of the person that you want to share the form with, and then they're able to access just that application form, not the entirety of your account.
That's great to know.
Other
Super handy.
questions or discussion? Yeah. I do think that both of these grants hold so much possibility for you as presenters, and it might be some untapped funding for you that you haven't been making use of just yet. And once you get on a roll of working these kinds of, and I know many of you are doing this already, once you're on a roll, it can really expand the possibilities for your presenting organization. So
Looks like we have one question from Andrew. As a performer, is it appropriate to approach schools and organizations and suggest they apply for the AISC grant? That's a great question, because sometimes it's like it might be an artist who has the most time to spearhead something like this.
Right. Yes. I'm so glad that you're mentioning this, Andrew, because I would say this happens probably about half the time. It's, artists are essentially gig workers, right? And so they're looking for every possibility to, extend their career, make some income, but also to serve their communities. And it is often the artists, the teaching artists, and or an outside guest artist on your series that are really trying to make more happen in a shorter amount of time, either income wise or to just serve that many more learners. So while we can't award funding to an artist directly, it is absolutely the case that they are a major collaborator, if not taking the lead. The only thing I would ask is that sometimes in the past we've had artists sort of working through a login that belongs to a person in that organization, and that is not our preference. Even if that's offered to you as the artist, I would just appreciate if you would say to them, hey, you're going to be the grantee, but you can use the collaborate button to share the form with me, and just that willingness to provide the lion's share of the narrative answers while they maybe submit things like budget and logistics and contact information and so on is a really great way to share the load and make that happen. So I hope that helps.
That's a great question, Andrew, and something I've talked about with various individuals, Monica, music teachers that are private teachers or in the schools. It does seem like, you know, between really, really, really busy and really busy school teachers versus nonprofit arts presenters who are accustomed to things like grant cycles and
Mhm.
reading eligibility requirements, and then like artists who actually deliver the experience. It does kind of take that whole village, or it can be really beneficial for those three entities to be the village that like helps
That's
each
right.
other put this together.
Yeah.
And considering who has the bandwidth is certainly part of planning how, you know, how that's going to work out with the application.
I couldn't agree more. You know, it really does kind of take a village sometimes, especially when it's maybe a project full of a lot of moving parts. Maybe, you know, you're applying it to your whole season. So there are a number of different artists, different, you know, involved schools and or teachers, you know, having at least one other partner in that in addition to the artist or artist that you're working with is really great. So um, it feels a little daunting, but once you are familiar with these grant processes, they don't tend to change too much from year to year. We made some improvements on the application within our grants management system, but the essence of these programs hasn't changed the last couple of years. And with the Experiences Grant, I'll just say too that, you know, it was really our intention to um, help grantees such as schools access the arts experiences that many organizations were more than willing to share. But again, there was a barrier such as transportation that we needed to help overcome in order to make that collaboration happen. So a lot of our performing entities around Montana are so gracious in sharing school day performances with local learners, but they cannot then also provide the transportation funds. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, are there any other last questions from anyone? This has been really great. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, Monica. I'm excited to have shared
Absolutely.
this program. And I hope that the folks here can look into it and make use of it to help bring artists into your schools or community centers, whatever you have in mind. You're already doing, I think, a lot of the kind of work that this program is intended to support. So hopefully it's just mostly helpful for you all. And feel free to reach out. This is recorded, so we'll make it available to you. I'll grab the slides as well and make that available to you as well. And feel free to reach out to either Monica or myself for any questions about this or any thoughts on resources like this. We're happy to share or answer questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily, for inviting me to do this. I was happy for the chance to talk to you all as a group. I do think that, again, this holds so much possibility for you. So I hope you'll reach out. My contact information is all over the guidelines that you can find on the website, and also the last slide that you'll see when Emily shares those out.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Stay warm
Yeah.
and see you at the next thing. Thank you. Bye-bye.